Welcome to a World of Difference podcast where we're live today across a couple of platforms. I'm here on my lunch break on a Friday, and I know that some of you, if you're on the West Coast, are also on your lunch break too, or you're ending your day very soon if you're on the East Coast and wherever you are listening to the world. Maybe you're up in the middle of the night in Asia. I can't sleep. I don't know. But welcome. This is a podcast where we celebrate humanity's unique perspectives and explore how we can all make a difference in our workplaces, our community, and our world. I'm your host, Lori Adams Brown, and today we're diving into a topic that affects many of us, but isn't always easy to talk about. We're going to talk about toxic work environments. Hopefully, you're not in one. Hopefully, you've never been in one. And hopefully, you're not taking uh, an opportunity to ignore what might be going on right in front of you as somebody who could make a difference in your workplace for yourself and for others. But if any of those are true, or you know people who have experienced that or currently are experiencing it, today we're going to dig into this topic, which is not easy to talk about, but really is a place where we can come together with our different perspectives, bring them around the table, and make a difference together. So, if you've been there and you're feeling drained before you even open your laptop, or you've been walking on eggshells around your boss, or maybe you're like in that TV show Severance, you feel like you're living two separate lives, one at work, one outside of it just to survive. I've not seen the new season. It's out. I'm waiting for my husband to get back from a conference in Orlando, and we might watch it together this weekend. I know there's also a podcast out about Severance, which I'm looking forward to listening to. But in the episodes of the season that I've already watched, I really thought the show is very well done. It shows how you can end up going into a workplace very obviously it's fiction and it's a bit dystopian, but it's about going into a workplace where you really have to just sever yourself, and there's some medical procedures that are involved in it. It's certainly some human rights violations, but um, this show obviously is exaggerating to make a point that's getting our attention. How are we walking into our workplaces? How are we creating workspaces where maybe you don't want to show up with every single part of yourself in that workspace, and that's appropriate in many situations. We do have geopolitical events where we have very different perspectives. Some people may or may not want to talk about their life much outside of work, but if we are contributing to a space where we can't be congruent or authentic or who we truly are, there's a lot of anxiety around that. Then mild versions of that are just uncomfortable and probably not good for business or good for the organization because there's a lack of psychological safety. But in a very extreme version of that, it could be a toxic work environment. And when we're seeing some things, change in the workplace in terms of um, connection to the EEOC or DEI initiatives changing. There's a lot of conversation going around in talent development how we can continue to provide opportunities for people to come and do their best work and be happy and be fulfilled and want to stay. We want attrition rates down. We don't want them to go up. We want employee engagement to still stay high and even increase, because all of this is both good for business and good for us. So today we're breaking down the biggest red flags of a toxic workplace and how to spot them before it's too late. And how to spot them before it's too late involves both if you're maybe a direct report or an individual contributor and you don't have a lot of opportunity to speak into the systems. But I'm also speaking especially maybe so to the people who do have opportunities to create and cultivate psychological safety in the workplace to help these systems get better. Because as I mentioned, it's not only good for organizations, it's good for us who are involved in them and where we spend the majority of our lives. We want these to be good places where we flourish and our companies and organizations grow all together. And I was just training yesterday in a leadership summit here in Silicon Valley where I work, and at the headquarters, where, once again, talking about how psychological safety is not only very important for us as human beings and human leaders and just individuals showing up at work, but it's actually an Project Aristotle, which was Google's research project years ago, where they studied teams and they wanted to know what was that key to successful teams. Well, guess what? They found out it's psychological safety. And it was a surprise to a lot of people. It had nothing to do with what university you went to, what your certifications are, what particular skills you had in technical areas. It had to do with cultivation of psychological safety. So, we're going to talk a little bit about how that is absolutely the opposite of a toxic work environment, and how one is good for organizations and one is very dangerous for organizations. So, whether you work in risk management, risk assessment, whether you're on a corporate board, an executive, an individual contributor, a manager, whoever you are, today we're going to have a conversation where you can find some takeaways to help your workplace and your lives and the lives of those that you work with get better. So, if you're already in one, I'm very, very, very heartbroken for you. But I'm going to share some practical steps you can take to protect yourself and plan your next move. So, let's get into it. We spend about a third of our lives at work. And so, when our workplace is toxic, it impacts everything. We see mental health suffers, anxiety, depression, burnout really skyrockets. That's not good for employees and it's not good for organizations. Physical health also declines because guess what? When you're experiencing something so toxic, the body keeps the score. A book that I read when I was just coming out of a toxic work environment and had escaped, and was working with a therapist on how to help my brain, my body, my soul, all of me heal and to move forward in a healthier way, which I'm so glad to say that I have. And I carry not only that journey with me of walking through that, escaping it and healing, but I carry with me the lessons that I learned, and to help shine a light on those who are just a few steps behind, who are walking that path right now. This is it is your responsibility to understand what's going on for you in a situation in a workplace, but it's also our collective responsibility, because we belong to each other, to cultivate workspaces where we can all thrive, because it does affect mental health, it does affect physical health, and our relationships take a hit as well. It's really hard to be present for your family, your loved ones, your book club, your sports team, your gym buddies, when work follows you home and it's like this storm cloud that you can't get away from. But many of us stay in toxic work environments because we often been told this is just how work is. I was told that, and I sort of believed it for a period of time. But what if we stop normalizing toxic work environments? What if we stop normalizing um, long work hours on a pattern of a regular basis that's not just on a case by case basis, but is sort of the culture of burnout? And what if we stop normalizing fear based management and dysfunction? So, I want to talk about some of the biggest red flags that signal a toxic work environment. We're going to talk about 5 of those. There are others, but we're going to dig into a few just on this episode and on this live. So, toxic work environments don't always just announce themselves, do they? You can be in a job interview. I've been in many job interviews, and things seem so shiny and happy for the most part. People are bringing their best selves, sort of like when you're on a first date or speed dating, or getting to know people present a certain version of the company in job interviews to make it look good. I mean, nobody wants to say the hard things. That can be hard to show up, but sometimes the signs sort of start to creep in slowly, until one day you wake up and you realize you feel like a completely different person. You aren't even who you used to be, and you're not even sure if you can find that person again. And so here's some 5 major warning signs that you might possibly be in a toxic work environment, and you might possibly be contributing it without even realizing it. So the first one would be if leadership operates solely on fear and control. And this is sort of like a power by fear type of a concept. Toxic leaders will use a lot of intimidation, manipulation, coercion, micromanagement, um, coercive control to sort of keep employees in line, not really listening to their perspectives, not giving them that psychological safety. If you feel constantly afraid to speak up or to make mistakes, that's a huge red flag. If there's a lot of blaming that goes on when a mistake is had made on the team, and you get singled out and publicly shamed and even ridiculed or intimidated, this is a sign, if that's happening on a regular basis. So if you constantly feel afraid to speak up when something's not right, this is a huge red flag. So an example might be a boss who publicly shames employees in meetings or withholds information to keep them in the dark in order to sort of sabotage them or prevent them from doing the work and have the information they need to do their work. On the other hand, a healthy workplace really fosters that psychological safety, cultivates a space where people can take risks. We're really big on this in Silicon Valley. Taking risks is how we learn, how we invent, how we move forward, get those patents that people are getting. And um, so, a place where that psychological safety exists for you to voice concerns, that something's not right. We want to get a hold of it before it becomes a whole huge fire, and causes attrition to go up and engagement to go down and innovation to go down. We want to create that psychological safety, which we see in healthy work environments where we can grow without fear of punishment, but where there's this growth mindset. We're in this together. We're doing this together. We're going to, we're human, but as we make mistakes, we're going to learn from that. We're going to move forward and we're going to keep getting better and inventing and having that innovation. The second one is a high turnover rate, high attrition, and then that survivor culture. So, what I mean by that is if people are constantly quitting, constantly getting fired, or just mysteriously disappearing, that's a sign that something could be deeply wrong in this culture of your work. So, an example is you realize you're the fifth person to hold a role in a single year. Yeah, that's be curious about that. What's the reason for that? Or when people leave, leadership dismisses them as not a culture fit. That's a phrase that could potentially be a red flag that instead of addressing the real problem and bringing different perspectives around the table to make a difference together in the work environment and allow those different perspectives to help open up new possibilities of new markets, of new inventions, of new products, of new ways of working to be a part of the future of work. If instead it's, oh, they weren't a culture fit, maybe there's not a psychological safety to bring your perspective. So that's something to be curious about. But a great workplace, on the other hand, invests in employee growth and retention. These are things we care very deeply about in talent development. And people stay when they feel valued, when they feel heard, and when they feel respected. Doesn't that ring true? Yes. The third thing is overwork is glorified or glamorized or seen as a part of the culture. In some toxic workplaces, grind culture is king. Employees wear burnout like a badge of honor, and you're expected to sacrifice your entire well being and your family for the company. An example would be as a pattern, regularly, your boss expects you to be available 24/7, and that taking PTO is seen as a weakness. And so, if that's a pattern you're seeing, not something that happens just, oh, we're starting this new thing or there's this new project. So, obviously, work gets a little more intense in these kind of seasons of ebb and flow. But if as a pattern, you're having to be available 24/7 and you're seen as weak for taking time off, this is not only a toxic work environment, it's not a place where you can be productive and you can bring your expertise and your full brain can be available to do great work because you're just barely surviving in a survivor culture. A healthy workplace respects both work life boundaries and encourages employees to rest, recharge, and take time off because we know, according to the research, that if you, as a pattern, are working 50 hours plus per week, according to the Stanford research that's been done on this, that you aren't as productive. But if you're as a pattern, as a regular rhythm, you're working 40 hours a week or less, that you actually are more productive. We are human. We have human limits. Let's let AI and the robots do their thing and they do it well and we partner well with them. But let's increasingly be human and show up with our curiosity, show up with our refreshed and renewed selves that have batteries. If you spend more time thinking about charging your electric vehicle, which I do at work, or you spend more time thinking about filling your gas tank in your car than you think about your own recharging, your own battery, um, maybe there's something in your environment that's lending you to think this way, and that you're not in a healthy workplace or that you haven't taken advantages of the healthy aspects of your workplace. All right, the fourth one is values are on paper, but chaos is the practice. So some companies really talk a big game about their culture, but the reality is they don't match. They might have their values listed on the website, or even on the wall, but they might claim to value things like working together, collaboration, teamwork, respect, or even work-life balance. But really, behind closed doors, it's a completely different story, and they're not living according to their values. I keep my personal values here on my desk where I keep them in front of me so that I'm living out by my values. My team takes time to look at our values in our office, and we discuss them. And in meetings, I often bring them up, a particular value that we might be living out well, or one where we're in a conversation where that value is on the table of how we're going to approach it. And so just being reminded of our values and keeping them front and center is really important. An example of this, could be, though, leadership really promotes a people first culture. But they expect employees to answer emails at midnight, or punish those who speak up and don't have a solid speak up practice or campaign or method to do so when something's not right. The reality is, at a risk management perspective, when people aren't allowed to speak up, um, metaphorically or even figuratively, if there's a fire in the warehouse and people don't feel free to speak up, that could spread crazy fast. But also, the same is true of toxicity in a toxic boss or a toxic situation on a particular team. That could spread very, very quickly and is a huge risk for organizations. So, a truly healthy workplace ensures that policies and practices align with their stated values. And if a company says one thing but does another in this area, that could be a red flag. The fifth one is secrecy and gossip replace transparency. And so, in toxic environments, employees are often really left in the dark. There's not a lot of communication about what's happening. Decisions happen behind closed doors, and gossip spreads faster than real information. So, things like, an example would be, raises, promotions, layoffs happen without any explanation. And leadership plays favorites instead of being really transparent about that kind of thing. On the other hand, a great workplace really values clear, honest communication and keeps employees informed in decision making. Not that everybody has to know everything about everything, but there's a huge difference between almost no information and saying everything to everyone who doesn't necessarily need to know at all levels of the organization. There just has to be a good level of communication where people generally feel that there's, a back and forth in that way. So, what can you do if you are in a toxic workplace? And once again, if you are, I'm very heartbroken for you. It's very difficult. Years ago, I was in one, and it was not only difficult to come up with an escape plan in the midst of the mental health struggles that brings up, and the physical struggles and the relational struggles that come out of something like that. But it's just, you need support. You need people with you that care for you. And I did have that. And I hope that you can find those people if you don't currently have them. But if you see red flags and these sound way too familiar, you're not alone. But here's what you can do. Number one, start documenting everything. Somebody gave me that advice and it was really helpful. Keep records of toxic behavior, just in case you might need some proof later. Number two, set some boundaries. Protect your energy and refuse to take on more than is reasonable. You want to grow in your career, and you want to stretch yourself and take those stretch assignments. But just be really clear on what your personal boundaries are so that you're making sure your battery is just as charged as the electric vehicles in your workplace. And then seek support is the third one. So find a mentor, talk to a trusted colleague, or seek professional help, maybe from a therapist who can help you walk through this and make some decisions that might be hard to make right now. Also, the fourth one is just to plan your exit strategy. So, if toxicity is beyond fixing and you've tried and you've had the conversations and you really are noticing all of these red flags and more, it really is start. It's time to start looking for a way out. You're not stuck. There are options for you. I know it's hard. It's hard to see right now, especially if you feel like you're in a hole and you're trying to find light in the darkness. But I keep this candle lit on my desk during the day. I'm right now here on my lunch break and I still have it lit while I'm here with you. But it's a reminder that even when things feel dark or seem dark, whether it's geopolitically or maybe in your workplace right now, or in life or family or in all kinds of ways in your community, that just one little candle lit in the darkness can make all the difference to help you find that path and see your way forward. And it's a reminder to not burn out, and to keep what you need to do to keep that candle lit, that you keep shining your light in your life and in your workplace. And I would love to hear from any of you who are either walking through that now or have come out of it, and what you've learned and what you're currently learning, so we can help each other out and find new ways to support each other as we cultivate workplaces where we all want to show up and have that psychological safety to have our organizations grow while we're growing at the same time. The most important thing to remember, you're not stuck. There are healthier workplaces out there. There are many good ones. If you need any recommendations, let me know, or any introductions. And you deserve to work in a space where you feel respected, valued, and safe. Toxic workplaces don't have to be the norm. By recognizing the signs early and choosing environments that support our well being, we can really create a world of difference for ourselves and for those around us. So, have you experienced a toxic work culture? Are you currently experiencing one? Did you experience one years ago? I'd love to know what signs you noticed first. And I'd love to hear your story. So, drop a comment, send me a message, or share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it right now. Don't forget to subscribe to World of Difference wherever you get your podcasts. And if this episode resonated with you, leave us a review. We really appreciate it. It makes a huge difference for us and how people can find the show. Until next time, keep showing up as your whole, congruent, and healthy self. Bye, everyone.